your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Hello, I'm Naveen Day. Thanks for joining us for a look at what made headlines this week. Thursday was Budget Day in the province, and Alberta's Finance Minister Nate Horner has introduced a budget that projects a $5.2 billion deficit this fiscal year on total spending of $79 billion. That represents an $11 billion swing from the current budget, which was on track to register a surplus close to $6 billion. This is the first deficit under Premier Daniel Smith and the first since the COVID-19 era budget of 2020. The province expects the deficits will remain through to 2027. Horner says the red ink is driven mainly by oil tariffs and a $1 billion tax cut that Smith's government has been promising to bring in for 2 years. Chris Sims, the Alberta director for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, says Albertans should have mixed feelings about the spring budget.
It was a yes and a no. So a big yes when it comes to Premier Daniel Smith keeping her election promise to reduce the provincial income tax. So a lot of folks may not realize this, but up until today, Albertans were kind of paying high provincial income taxes. So it was at 10% if you're earning up to $140,000. So that was, covering most of the working and middle class of this province. So what they've done is they've reduced that down to 8% for the first $60,000 worth of earnings. What that means in reality is that the average Alberta worker will save around $750 per year. If you make that into a two-person working family, that's more than $1,500. I did the math, and that covers more than a month's worth of groceries for a family of 4. So these are big-time tax savings. We're really happy to see that, but this deficit is definitely causing concern.
An Alberta cabinet minister says he is resigning from his post, citing concerns over procurement practices across government. Infrastructure Minister Peter Guthrie has urged Adriana LaGrange to be removed as health minister amid allegations of government arm twisting and favoritism surrounding overpriced health deals. He says the rest of the cabinet doesn't share his worries. Guthrie says he'll better serve as his constituents as a backbencher by pushing Premier Daniel Smith's government to conduct itself with honesty and integrity. In a statement released Tuesday, Smith accepted Guthrie's resignation, adding, he has obviously expressed concerns regarding the allegations made by the former CEO of Alberta Health Services. As I've said repeatedly, those allegations are serious and are being fully investigated. Meanwhile, Alberta NDP leader of the opposition, Christina Gray, is calling for the resignations of both the health minister and the premier and for a judicial public inquiry. And more than 800 community peace officers from 34 large and mid-sized municipalities will immediately integrate their communications and dispatch systems with local police. The move by the Alberta government is meant to collaboratively tackle the social disorder that arises from the use of illicit drugs, including fentanyl. Minister of Public Safety and Emergency Services Mike Ellis says this initiative is part of a Team Canada approach to wane off the threat of tariffs promised by U.S. President Donald Trump, brought on by concerns of fentanyl making its way south of the border.
This is an issue which is occurring both ways across this border. Prime Minister Trudeau has responded by committing 10,000 personnel that would be deployed to strengthen border protection and to combat the issue of the fentanyl crisis. Here in Alberta, we're doing our part for a strong Team Canada solution with a visible law enforcement presence to deter illegal activity. Currently, over 800 peace officers within Alberta have different authorities than police officers, and that distinction will remain in place. I will say by integrating their efforts, we can ensure all available law enforcement resources are working together under a unified command to combat fentanyl.
Ellis adds the province will evaluate the effectiveness of this initiative at a later date. U.S. President Donald Trump says economy-wide tariffs will go ahead on March 4th as planned, including 25% tariffs on most Canadian goods with a lower 10% levy on energy. Trump reaffirmed the tariffs, insisting Canada hasn't done enough at the border and that illicit drugs are still pouring into the U.S. A team tasked with shoring up Canada's border with the U.S. recently joined politicians in Washington to show progress and make a final diplomatic push against import tariffs. Canadian law enforcement, Public Safety Minister David McGuinty, and Canada's fentanyl czar, Kevin Brosseau, insist they've been meeting standards set by the U.S. for a tighter border. Speaking outside the White House Thursday, McGuinty says the federal government has shown progress and has met standards for the border.
We've had several days of meetings. We're going to continue for the next several days, meeting with different individuals in the American administration, elected officials, senators, congresswomen, congressmen, counterpart organizations like the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we're sharing the efforts that have been undertaken by Canada and Canadians to make that strong border stronger. The evidence is irrefutable. The progress is being made. In my view, any test that was put on this country, on Canada, in terms of showing progress and meeting standards for the border, I believe those have been met.
As we care about, as the minister said, ensuring a strong border, continuing that strong border, as well as the safety of our communities.
Now, over the last several weeks, you've heard a lot about tariff threats from a Canadian perspective, but we also want to show you the American perspective. There are, however, our closest ally and our biggest trading partner. I sat down with our foreign affairs correspondent, Lisa Daftari, to hear her thoughts. Lisa, the latest Canadian commodity that faces the threat of 25% tariffs is our country's lumber. Now, as a Los Angeles resident, how do you see this threat living so close to residents who are working to rebuild their homes following devastating wildfires in your area?
Yeah, there's a debate. Look, it's like everything else that Donald Trump puts forth, right? What those who love him understand that this is, what he's attempting to do, or will try to at least try to make sense of it. And there was a lot of debate among people who study this day in and day out. And of course, they're anti-tariff. That is not the way to keep markets free and flowing and organic, obviously. But when it comes to leveraging what the United States can do, some see it as that stepping stone. Now, should this be an all-out tariff war, that is probably not the goal that Donald Trump has in mind. But to your point, will he keep his word? I do believe that he will. He did it before with China as well. But the goal being that he won't have to go that far.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants to see the Keystone XL pipeline built. He says the pipeline expansion would have sent more oil sands crude to the U.S. Gulf Coast, adding it would get, quote, easy approvals and an almost immediate start if it's revived. While Alberta Premier Daniel Smith says the project should have never been canceled, the owner of the existing Keystone system says the company has moved on from the expansion plan. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly says Trump's comments on Keystone XL and tariffs are sending a conflicting message. Here he is with BCN's Paul Arthur.
Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, he's saying, the tariffs are definitely coming for Canada and for Mexico. 25% tariffs. They've treated us horribly. We shouldn't accept this anymore. A few hours later, he goes on Truth Social. So that the first statement about the tariffs, that was at a White House news conference with French President Emmanuel Macron. And then hours later on Truth Social, he writes, I was just kind of thinking. And then goes on about how Keystone XL has to come back. He's been spending weeks saying that America has enough oil, it doesn't need Canadian oil. You and I know that's not true. The viewers know that's not true. But conflicting messages all around. This is the difficult part of Donald Trump is, even the reasons that he put forward for the tariffs were different than what he had put forward before. So trying to keep up and trying to nail him down, very difficult.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And part of me thinks too, like with these tariffs, is it just, part of his negotiation plan, or just the way he does things, keeps people guessing, and it's more of a leverage tool, and I wonder if that's really what it is. But is it even possible, realistically speaking, to revive the Keystone XL pipeline?
I don't think so. TransCanada is a different company now. It's now TC Energy. The work that was done, that pipe is, been sitting, not being used. So it's probably the stuff that was in the ground. If it wasn't ripped out, it's not in good shape. They went through that process, starting around 2007, 2008. They were back and forth, up and down, approved. The approvals revoked. It's been very difficult time. Would you get back involved in such a fraught project? Probably not. I mean, maybe someone could revive that. I doubt that TC Energy is going to jump in and say, you know what, we'd really like to be treated as a political punching bag by both sides for the next decade and try to finish this pipeline.
I guess the bright side for anybody thinking about building a pipeline is that you know you're going to have the support of the Trump administration on that side. On this side, it's still pretty unclear. Now, I think if Poilievre...
The Trudeau Liberals had supported Keystone XL previously. Now, would that have changed? I mean, they've passed Bill C-69 since then. You've got the radical Stephen Guilbeault, currently the environment minister. Mark Carney is all about net zero. He released his economic plan with no word about oil and gas. So it's doubtful that they would get strong support from the Canadian government. And then you've only got a 4-year window to get this through. Because what if the Democrats win again?
Yeah, give you enough time. I don't know.
And speaking of pipelines, it's really something to see almost all of our federal political leaders supporting the idea of building a coast-to-coast pipeline after years of blocking pipeline development. Cody Battershill is the founder of Canada Action, which is a volunteer-led grassroots movement encouraging Canadians to act in support of the natural resources sectors of our nation. I sat down with him to hear his thoughts on why it took Trump tariff threats to change our collective mindset.
Well, I think it's a reminder that we currently sell most of our exports to the United States, and oil and gas is Canada's largest export, and most of that's going to the United States. So with the Trans Mountain expansion, we are now selling more oil to more countries than ever before, but it's still a small percentage of our total production and our total exports. And when your top trading partner says they might all of a sudden impose a tariff, I think it's a reminder that as Canadians, we should control our own economic security and have that necessary trade diversification. And that means building pipelines, ports, power lines, railways, and roads to empower the communities, the families, our fellow Canadians who make up our natural resource production so that we can control our own destiny, maximize the value of our resources, and have a stronger economy in the future.
And looking at a recent Angus Reid poll, we learned that 79% of Canadians surveyed say Canada needs oil and gas pipelines going from sea to sea. But there's still the hurdle of the province of Quebec. Do you think Quebec politicians will change their mind on this?
I think we've seen a lot of movement. And I think over the years, over the last 10 to 15 years, Canada Action and many of your listeners, many of your viewers today have been strong proponents for a strong resource sector to underpin our quality of life. Now we're seeing more provinces, more of our fellow Canadians recognize that. And it's a missed opportunity. We did not build Energy East when it was originally proposed. It was a regulatory roadblock after roadblock put in front of that project. But we need to get that project or a project like that built to connect Eastern Canada to Western Canada. We also have to remember we're still importing billions of dollars per year of oil, even from places like Saudi Arabia and Nigeria. Let's make sure all Canadians can access Canadian-made energy and natural resources to have better security and a better economy. And this is a very important topic with what's going on right now with President Trump.
But Quebec has traditionally been one of those roadblock provinces, and which is odd considering they get equalization payments from Alberta, which come from oil and gas. So do you see like any type of shift happening specifically with Quebec on this?
We've seen some polling numbers showing that in Quebec, there's more support for a pipeline like Energy East, also for revitalizing their LNG project that was also canceled by the federal government right around the time of the Russia invasion of Ukraine. And it's interesting when you think about how many countries in Europe and Asia have been literally asking for Canadian-made oil and natural gas in the last 3 years and longer. This is the time to bring our country together. I think we need to be working hand in hand with our fellow Canadians and other provinces, including Quebec, to build that consensus, rather than looking back and saying, we made that mistake. Now we need to be talking about how we're going to work together going forward, because I do think we have more support than ever before in Quebec for these needed pipeline projects.
When it comes to harvesting coal, it is getting increasingly difficult. This is thanks to a motion passed by Lethbridge City Council last Tuesday. The unanimous vote recommits its opposition to any and all coal developments that risk damage to the Old Man watershed. Councillor Belinda Croson says she tabled the official business motion based on many inquiries and concerns on the matter, and she saw it as an opportunity to reaffirm Council's stance publicly once again.
We've known since the 1970s, and that 1976 coal policy came about after decades of fighting. The people of Alberta love our mountains, want to protect our water, and are about protecting the environment, protecting our agriculture, and protecting, the environment and everyone who relies on that water system. We have an information session coming up on April 10th at one of the Economic Standing Policy Committees, where our staff will be bringing forward a presentation because, of course, science is changing, and we want to see some of the new studies that the province has brought out and what is actually happening. So we'll see that. Because it's a Standing Policy Committee, members of the public are welcome to come as well, and we're hoping that we'll have a fulsome conversation for information about what the newest standings are today.
A man who attended the Freedom Convoy in 2022 and was arrested and convicted of mischief began appealing his conviction on Wednesday. Scott Hockaday protested in Ottawa during the rally in order to motivate government medical officials to debate doctors who had criticized the government's COVID response. During the crackdown on the Freedom Convoy that followed the invocation of the Emergencies Act, the arresting officers did not witness Hockaday do anything other than approach other officers, speak to them, turn around, and put his hands behind his back. The arresting officers then approached the scene and completed the arrest. Hockaday's lawyer, Haddam Kerr, explains the circumstances surrounding this seemingly peculiar incident.
The idea there is that vehicles blocking the streets are causing a mischief by obstructing the use of the property, namely the streets. And then the issue is whether or not he, based on the evidence, was connected to that mischief. And so the trial judge found that on the basis of his presence that day, coupled with his Facebook posts, she could conclude that he was a supporter of it. So you can, the trial judge didn't completely articulate whether he was found guilty as a principal or as a party, but you can be found. You're a party to an offense if you aid it, meaning you assist it in some way, or you abet it, meaning you encourage it in some way.
On Wednesday, Kerr argued that Hockaday's charter right to be free from arbitrary detention and from unreasonable search and seizure were infringed because the arresting officer did not have reasonable grounds to arrest him. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is taking the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation to court to force the public broadcaster to provide transparency regarding the money it spends on advertising. The legal challenge stems from an access to information request filed by the CTF requesting records detailing how much the CBC has spent on advertising over the past 5 years. The request was denied. General Counsel for the CTF, Devin Drover, explains why.
They're claiming an often used exemption under the Access to Information Act, saying that it is confidential information that will hurt their competitive position. While, this might be the case, for example, if we were asking how much did they bid on X contract, that might cause a problem where, another agency might be able to see, oh, well, if they're spending X dollars, we know we don't need to spend Y, we can lower our bidding. We're not asking for that level of granularity here. We're just asking for the number. Is it X million dollars? Is it Y million dollars? It should not be a difficult piece of information for the CBC to reveal, and I think taxpayers are absolutely entitled to it. And you have to look at the context right now. The CBC has been struggling financially. Their ratings are at abysmal low levels. Despite that, they're asking for more money constantly. So if they're asking for more money from taxpayers, taxpayers want to know and have every right to know where that money is being used, including how much is being spent on ads.
Now, this court case comes on the heels of Heritage Minister Pascal St-Onge's recommendation that the CBC's public funding almost double in a bid to bolster the public broadcaster and end its reliance on advertising. Liberal Party members began casting advance ballots Wednesday to select their next leader and Prime Minister. They can cast their ranked ballot choices by mail or, in some instances, by phone, choosing between Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gold, and Frank Baylis. The four candidates made their pitches to Liberal voters this week during two high-stakes debates in Montreal, where they discussed everything from healthcare and the economy to U.S. tariff threats. A new leader will be chosen on March 9th, and a federal election is widely expected to be called soon after.
We've been specific that we're eliminating the consumer carbon tax. We're taking a variety of other measures around that. And one of those measures that is related to, but not exclusively related to that, because it's a broader aspect, is a middle-class tax cut that will more than make up for the loss of the rebate that Canadians receive.
There is work to do now, absolutely. Now is the time we need to focus on jobs and growth. But the central issue for the Canadian economy and for our existence as a country right now is Donald Trump. This is an existential moment. My campaign is built around that. It is built around the recognition that this is a challenge to our existence as a country.
Meanwhile, Conservatives are alleging that the frontrunner in the federal Liberal leadership race urged shareholders to support his company's relocation from Canada to New York City months before he resigned from his job. They are also accusing Mark Carney of being untruthful about when he resigned from the board of Brookfield Asset Management. Wednesday, both Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre and Conservative MP Michael Barrett took to social media to say that Carney lied about having nothing to do with Brookfield moving their headquarters out of Canada to the U.S. On his X account, Poilievre said, quote, "Documents show he chaired the board meeting that unanimously determined the move, taking jobs away from Canadians. His name is on the letter urging shareholders to approve the move. Why did Mark Carney lie about his decision to sell out Canadian jobs?" End quote. Barrett says Carney was chair of Brookfield's board when they unanimously voted to move their headquarters to the States and posted the letter Carney wrote to shareholders urging them to approve the move. Carney, however, claims he had already left the company when the move happened. Black History Month came to a close this past week, and it ended in a very colorful and fashionable way. More on that up next. Although February is over and with it, Black History Month, it's good to continue to remember throughout the year the achievements and events that marked the history of Black people. With cultural food and fashion, students and employees of Lethbridge Polytechnic participated in the closing ceremony. Ugo Nalisa, a student at Lethbridge Polytechnic, explains their culture.
When people get to know how we dress, how colorful we look, I used to tell people that it kicks off a conversation. Like when they see your purse, see your embroidery, they want to find out, well, how is it made? Where is it from? It's actually a point to start off a conversation, and then people get to know you beyond your color or your accent. Black people have excelled in many aspects of life. So it's beyond the stories that are told over and over by some narrative. Black people are excelling in science, in technology, in city, everywhere, and there is need to celebrate where we are coming from and where we have gotten to and where we are going to.
It's important for us to express our culture as Black people because we're from many different nations, and one thing I can say is Black people love to celebrate. And so as we've seen today, African dress, there's also some Jamaicans here. I'm wearing my stuff too, so it's important to us to celebrate and dress up and party and have food. Black History Month is important to not just Black people but to everyone because it's a part of our history, and I'll encourage every person to just dig in, do some research, find out who we are because there's so many different countries and cultures, and it will be nice to meet other people who can tell me about Jamaica as opposed to me saying I'm from Jamaica, this is what Jamaica is. So it is important for us to continue to do that as one people.
Notable Black figures in Canada include Dr. Dominique Gaspard, who during the First World War suspended his studies to enlist in the Canadian Expeditionary Force, which was part of the Canadian Army Medical Corps. Gaspard graduated in 1918 and was one of the first generation of doctors of African descent. University of Lethbridge held its second annual In a Skim Future Students Day, and it was designed to break barriers and open pathways to success for Indigenous students. Beth Greer, Indigenous Recruitment Officer of the University of Lethbridge, explains the purpose of holding events like this and shares the special programs the university offers for Indigenous students.
Is essentially our Indigenous open house. So it's meant to provide all the different opportunities on campus that are available. You're able to put a face to the name of who you're connecting with and learn more about the programs that we offer, the services. So it's just meant so that students that don't have that person to help them know where to start, well, they can come here and we help them start right from our very own doors. We have our Indigenous Governance and Business Management program that is special to us. We have our Indigenous Health, our Indigenous Art Studio and Museum Studies, and then of course we have our Indigenous Student Success Certificate. We've faced a lot of different challenges throughout the years and our history and everything. So sometimes we just need that helping hand where you need someone that's relatable, your role model, that's someone from community. So.
And in case you're wondering about the word Inniskim, it's actually the University of Lethbridge's Blackfoot name. It means sacred buffalo stone, and it was gifted by Elder Bruce Wolfchild in 2002. The 2025 edition of the Southern Alberta Home, Garden and Leisure Show is ready to kick off and offer new things. The show will be held March 13th to 15th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center to ensure an enhanced and engaging experience for both exhibitors and attendees. The executive officer with Build Lethbridge Region, Bridget Mearns, explains what's new at the show this year.
It's a sold-out show this year, so we have the space. It's in one place. In the past, the facility was, well, as you probably know, was kind of blocked up in different sections. This, you have the whole show in front of you. We are offering is a net zero wall guides training to all of the vendors that are in the show this year. So we're also offering them a free education component, and also to do that to network, but also offer some educational components. And I have to admit, the helicopter is pretty cool. I've seen this show evolve over tens of years, and I've seen how important it is to our community businesses, and it's a favorite in our community. And one of my favorite things is watching how people come together at the Home and Garden Show. There are people who haven't seen each other, it's been a long winter, they open the doors, the sun is shining, and they see their neighbors or people they haven't seen for a while. So it's a place where Southern Alberta gathers.
That every time we do a show, we open up the submissions, right, to our exhibitors and our attendees, and we're just like, because you're never going to get it right. You know, that's one of the things that our companies learned about large-scale events. You're going to get close, but there's going to be stuff you're going to miss. So we listen to the community, we listen to our exhibitors, we listen to our sponsors, and they're like, what can we add to the show that's going to make it better?
Mearns says a portion of the show's proceeds will be donated to a local Southern Alberta Emergency Medical Services charity. Coming up after the break, BCN's Paul Arthur talks with realtor Anne French with Grassroots Realty about the booming real estate market in Southern Alberta and what is causing the rise of house prices. And if you're watching us online, that full interview is available on our YouTube channel.